Hi everybody, welcome to Living Traditions Homestead. My name is Sarah, this is my husband Kevin, and we have been thinking back to when we first moved on to this homestead in the Missouri Ozarks and back to our urban homestead in the Phoenix area of Arizona, and just how overwhelming those first couple months can be, especially when you're trying to figure out what is the most important thing to start working on first. And in our case, because it is so important, it's the most important thing for us is to grow our own food. We made a big decision that the first thing that we would do is to plant some key things in the homestead to get us started.
Yeah, one thing we would suggest is when you first move on to a homestead, you sit down and you make some lists of your priorities. You know, what are the first plants that you should grow, which is what we're talking about today. What are the first animals you want to get? You know, what are the first projects you want to do? And really, you know, have a game plan as you go forward. But we really feel like what we're going to talk about today, the first plants to plant, is probably the most important.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it and start talking about the 6 most important plants for you to get in the ground as soon as possible on your new homestead. The very first things that you guys should plant on your homestead, the first chance you get, either in the spring or the fall, are fruit trees. When you're planting fruit trees in a new area, you want to make sure that you get to know the varieties that are going to do best in your area. Talk with your neighbors, look at the university near you, and determine what's going to be the best as far as producing fruit and what will be resistant to any of the diseases and the pests that may be in your area. Also keep in mind that a lot of orchard trees need one or more trees and one or more types of trees to help pollinate them. They're not all self-pollinated. So keep those in mind. When we moved here, we planted apple, crabapple, peach, pear, plum, and cherry.
So the second most important thing that we think you should plant as soon as you can when you move onto your homestead are nut trees. On our homestead we have several varieties of wild nut trees. And because of that, we were under the impression that it wasn't that important for us to plant trees right away. And that, I will admit, is the one thing out of these 6 that we feel like we've failed at. We have a lot of black walnuts and we have a lot of hickory nuts on our property, so we will be planting pecan trees and maybe some almond trees down the road, hopefully actually next spring. But again, nut trees are one of those things you want to plant as soon as you can, because a lot of them can take a decade or more before you're going to start getting nuts off of them. And again, just like Sarah said with the fruit trees, you really want to research the varieties that will do best in your area. Like here in Missouri, our conservation department sells trees, but to be honest, they're not the best producing for our area. When you're trying to produce food, you want to research varieties that are going to have the most prolific and abundant harvest for you each fall.
The next thing that we think you should plant right away on your homestead are berry bushes and berry plants. Most berry bushes and berry plants, like these thornless blackberries, are going to take several years to get established and to start bearing fruit. There are so many wonderful options for homesteaders to plant berries: blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, elderberries, and the list just goes on and on. They are such a wonderful addition to the homestead. Make sure you plant these first.
So the next thing that we think is very important to plant right away, if you like to eat it, is asparagus. We have an entire raised bed planted of asparagus. We're going to let it just keep multiplying over the years. Asparagus takes quite a while before you can start picking it, which for someone like me, who isn't very patient, really kind of sucks. There's 2 ways that you can plant asparagus. You can buy crowns, which is like a root ball. If you plant those, you want to wait 2 years before you start to pick the asparagus off of it. You can also plant it from seed, which you can see lots of seed here behind me. These will start to fall and replant themselves. If you're going to plant from seed, you want to wait 3 years before you start to pick it. And that's a long time when you really want to eat some asparagus. So get that in the ground as soon as you can once you get on your homestead, so those 3 years go by as fast as possible.
The next thing that we think you should plant right away are any perennial herbs or really any other perennial plant that will provide you guys food. I love to cook. I cook homemade all the time, and the best thing for me to have around are fresh herbs or herbs that I can dry to use over the winter. In the next couple of years, I will be planting rose bushes that create these giant rose hips, which are fabulous. Rose hips are a great source of vitamin C, especially in the winter. If you collect them and dry them, you can add them to teas and are just a healthy drink in the winter. You can also make rose hip jelly and other creative things on the homestead.
The last thing that we think you should get in the ground as soon as possible when you move onto your homestead is rhubarb. Rhubarb is another one, kind of like asparagus, that takes several years before you want to start picking it. After 2 years, you can pick a little bit of it, but you don't want to go overboard, or you could end up killing your plant and having to start over. Really, the best is wait 3 or 4 years before you start harvesting a decent amount of it. Rhubarb, you can buy the roots, and you want to plant those. Rhubarb does need some cold weather. It doesn't do really well in the heat. This is starting to die back now because it's fall time. They actually did pretty well this year. This was the first year we were able to harvest a little bit off of them. If you live in a place where it's really warm, like we used to in Phoenix, there's actually a trick that you can do. They say, we tried it and it only worked mediocre. But what you can do is in the winter, you can dig up the root ball and put it in the freezer for a couple months and then replant it in the spring. And it kind of fools the plant into thinking that it went through winter. Like I said, we only had mediocre success with that, but we did live in a desert. So if you live somewhere where it's warm but still a little humid, or you get some rain, you might be able to make that work. So there you go, the 6 things that we think you should get in the ground as soon as possible when you move onto your homestead. Look at your local area, look at your climate, and figure out the best time of year, and then get these things in the ground the first opportunity that you can during that prime season.
It's so important. You guys, thanks so much for coming by today and spending some time with us. We hope you learned something. Hey, if you're not a subscriber of our channel yet and you really like this video, we would sure appreciate you hitting the subscribe button below. Thank you to all of our faithful traditionalists that come back 5 days a week to watch all of our new videos. If you know somebody that you think would enjoy this video or our channel in general, please go ahead and share that with them. And until next time, thanks so much for stopping by the homestead. Take care and God bless.
God bless.